Welcome to True and Unpolished. Through this podcast, our intention is to uplift, amuse, and inspire you to create more of a life you'll love. Let's get authentic, everybody. Oh boy, do I have a treat for you today. So, full disclosure, I do not listen to every episode of True and Unpolished. Hold on, calm down. I don't because I'm actually a part of the conversation and get a lot out of the conversations that I have. And to be honest, sometimes the sound of my own voice is intolerable to me. And hopefully that is not the case for you. Otherwise, I suppose you wouldn't be listening. So today we have on the show Stacy Parish, artist, author, and teacher. She is amazing. And I promise you, this is a guarantee. I will give you all my phone number so that you can personally call me to tell me that this is not the case. No, okay, never mind. What I'm saying to you is that I promise you, you will have at least 2 aha moments during this episode. That's right, I said it, at least 2. If you're like me, then you'll have probably 5 or 6, but definitely at least 2. I'm not going to keep you waiting anymore. Take a listen. So, Stacy, I'm so glad that you are here with Mary and I.
Hello.
Your visit, and we can't wait
to
hear from you. And do you have a story to tell us? Do you have what do you got? What's on your heart and mind?
I do. Sorry, I was stepping on you for a second there. I'm just so excited.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So, what keeps coming to me and the lesson that I keep getting and the story that I keep being nudged and encouraged to tell is the story of finding one's voice. And for me right now, it's manifesting in the form of a podcast. And I've always been a storyteller and I've always been fearless. Unfortunately, as a little girl, my fearlessness was very scary for my family. And it wasn't because they were afraid I was going to get hurt. It was because they were afraid I was going to tell. There were things that happened in my home that if I had told wouldn't have been a good thing. So, the fact that and I've always had this, I've always been a truth teller.
Mm-hmm.
Some people would call it authenticity. I don't know that I certainly don't have the market cornered on authenticity, but I do believe I've always been a truth teller. And as a little kid, I was pretty precocious and my voice was silenced pretty early because it had to be. And in my 30s, I got clean and sober and I found my voice and I began a career in broadcasting. And when I was a little kid, I had my favorite gift always was a tape recorder. Every Christmas, I would get a tape recorder. And it wasn't safe for me to tell my stories or do anything anywhere else. So I would sit in my bedroom with my sister. She usually got a tape recorder too. And we would put together these programs that cracked us up. Like we would record commercials and talk shows and all of this stuff. And what was so interesting is that my desire to tell stories and be heard and be fearless and be out there came what I like to call full spiral when I was in my 30s. But then I ended up losing that career for a variety of reasons that I can either go into or not. And it was really sad for me. And now that I'm in my 50s and my last early 50s, okay?
Early, very early.
Let's just be clear. We were just talking about under eye concealer. So let's just be clear. Anyway.
I'll edit it out. Don't worry.
No, I kind of like it. You can leave it in.
Okay, good.
That was a real moment.
Yeah.
So my last little bird, my youngest child, just left the nest and things are coming full spiral again. And I'm starting this podcast. I've had so 2020 was what happened in 2020, and 2021 has been even more revolutionary for me after a year in incubation, sort of the way 2020 was. And I have found my voice in a way that I've never had it since I was that little girl. And so it's manifesting in this super cool, exciting podcast that I'm calling Full Spirals.
Well, that is
because
amazing.
spirals have also been, that's just been my favorite shape, my favorite design, the thing I doodled as a kid. I have doodles from when I was little. I have doodles from high school. I filled entire pages of spirals. Got my spiral ring on. Like, spirals are just my jam. And so it's just this very cool, spiritual, mental, emotional, delicious journey.
So I love what you're talking about because one, I had an experience of recording myself. It did not go as beautifully, but when I was like in middle school or something, I thought, I'm going to record my singing. And it was the first time I became aware that I really didn't have much of a singing voice.
Oh, I love that.
And but that's okay. I still love to sing and accepted it. The other thing that what you're talking about made me think about is something called the instinctual trauma response. And it's actually an art therapy process or treatment that was developed by this woman named Linda Gant. And I think because I know you combine art and skills in a similar way to what I do, and I'd love to hear more about that. But what they do, she works with her husband, who is a psychiatrist, and she's an art therapist. And what they do is they go through the stages of trauma. So there's like 7 stages of trauma, and there's a before and there's an after. And basically, this is like what you're doing is telling your story, but basically they are they have their clients draw the story out 9 pages, and then they tell the story. And what that does, what you're describing, is it removes people from the experience. It's the same way Lydia and I have talked about EMDR and the brain spotting, but this is a technique that's specific to art therapy. And it's amazing. I've done it with clients, and I think that what you instinctually knew as a child is that you did have to tell your story to remove it from your experience. And it's so cool that you're doing that now.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for saying, like, that makes me cry, Mary. That makes me cry, because it's a truth. That's a truth that I've always known. And it's a truth that had to be hidden because it wasn't okay for me to tell my story.
Yeah.
But it's what I've always known that I needed to do. Yeah. And so the reason I didn't fit in the broadcast world, the reason I didn't fit in commercial radio, is because it was never about amplifying my voice. It was never about being famous or being a celebrity, and that's the problem in that industry. So many, most of the people in that industry, I shouldn't say this. Okay. It's not most of a lot of the people in that industry, the reason they get into it is to be famous and be a celebrity. And pardon me if you're in that industry and that's not why you're doing it. There's a lot of really good people in that industry, but a lot of people do it for that reason, and they do it to amplify their voice. And it was never about that for me. I'm getting really emotional, but it was always about just telling stories. It's always been about telling the stories. And I with my podcast, so my first season is going to be about telling my stories, because it's really, really important for me to own those and to put them out there. Mm-hmm. But the second season is about amplifying other people's stories. And it's about every day. I don't know if you guys are familiar with StoryCorps.
Yes, but it's been a long time. Refresh my memory.
So they put the booths around, I believe it started in New York, and just anybody can go into the booth and record a story.
Mm-hmm.
And then they broadcast them. And I'm also a huge fan of the Moth Radio Hour, which is all about storytelling.
Me too.
There's just
another program that I'm involved with is the Warrior Path, which is a program that helps veterans, and a huge part of their program involves storytelling. And I'm actually, because the first course that I created involves making altered books. And so I'm working with an organization here that works with veterans in the Warrior Path, and we're going to incorporate this altered bookmaking as part of the storytelling. And I think it's so important. And but also, and I'll be curious to hear what both you and Lydia have to say about this, but there's also, so we need a way to be able to tell our story, whether that's through art or music or writing or just talking. But we also simultaneously need to move away from the story and live in the moment. So there's this idea of, I need my voice to be heard. I need to tell my story, but I also need to be present in my life.
Yes. It's so interesting that you should say that, because one of the other things that I'm working on is a mentoring program, sort of based around that, but using the arts as a tool for doing that. And it begins with, I wasn't prepared to talk about this because the program itself is in beta testing right now, so I'm not doing it yet, but it's because I have done this and I have walked this walk. I'm prepared to share it with people as a peer, not as a coach, but as a peer.
Yeah.
I have a little, I don't have trouble with the word coach, but I don't embody the word coach. I'm much more like walking next to someone rather than, the hierarchy of coach. So anyway, but it's about the very first session is tell me your story. Yeah. And then it's about what are the limiting beliefs that you have based on that story. And then we transform those beliefs through something called a soul scribble. And I have gotten a lot of these techniques from different places. I don't own all of this, or I didn't come up with all of this, but by the end, it's tell me your story, but it's a new story. Yeah. The very last session. So it's 5 sessions, and the very last session is tell me your story, but it's a new story. And I also, I use the 4 elements through it too. So I'm using, I start with air, and then we move into fire, and then water, and then earth. And the earth is about planting the seed of your new story and then watching it grow. Because I'm a nature girl too. I'm very much a nature girl at heart. It's like that. That's the other thing that I was as a little girl, and that I'm getting back to. Because there were beautiful. Yeah, there were lots of stories around that, like girls didn't get dirty and girls didn't, the things. And I was like, but I really need to climb this tree. Like, that's what I really need to do right now. So I'm owning that part of myself again too. So, yeah.
What came to me as both of you are talking, and this, realization that, amplifying your voice, finding your voice, and then using your voice is such a common theme. I believe that it's what we all want. Like, what we want is to be seen, really seen.
Yes, that's right.
And acknowledged to be, an eternal being, an eternal soul, like me and you, me too kind of thing. And I know that, and around my childhood and that sort of thing, what I did, because I wanted to find my voice, was I would tell anybody that sat next to me for more than 60 seconds everything that had ever happened to me. And I knew all
come on.
And it would change. The villains would change in the story too, because it's like I would get new perspective on telling this one and that one. And I go, oh, well, maybe it's not that person's fault. Maybe it's that person's fault, and
Yeah.
I recognize that it came from that play. It came from my soul, but every intuition, every awareness that it arrives to us from our soul. I mean, this is the way that I see it. In my experience, it comes up, but it is filtered through the consciousness that we have at the time. And I was very
Yes.
much in victim mentality. And one of my favorite things to say about that is I am the spiritual leader at Unity of Appleton here in Wisconsin. And the board had made the decision that I was going to be the spiritual leader, but I had just walked in the door and I knew that's what I was there to do. And then I thought, oh my gosh, who's going to tell them? Because I'm not telling them. And so the board had finally, acknowledged I'd been on the board, and they all made the decision, but we hadn't announced it yet. And I think it was Christmas Eve. I don't remember, but we were all downstairs, and this man walks up to me, and he is a man who, he is like 90 years old. And so, he's in his 90s. And so he's lived through a lot, right? And
Love it.
to him, he was kind of like a business mogul, and he was a powerful guy and had his own experiences. And he came up to me during this gathering. He doesn't know yet that the board is going to announce that I'll be the spiritual leader. And he said, I know who the next spiritual leader is. And I said, you do? And he said, yes. And they're in this room. And I said, really? Who is it? And he points over at my husband.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
see, his intuition was right on. He was getting intuition, but filtered through his own.
Right.
A woman couldn't be the leader. Right. And
right.
So it was
right.
adjacent. It was,
Amazing.
it had to be adjacent. And so, everything that comes to us is filtered through that consciousness. And so for me, my trying to find my voice has been this story of climbing out of victim consciousness and trying to find my actual authentic story to tell, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah.
I've been listening to Joe Dispenza stuff, and a big part of his meditations is focusing on the future. And that's different from what I teach, which is, all in the present, mindfulness and that sort of thing. So it's been real helpful to me because I'm trying to move away from telling the same story, like this pattern of telling the same story about, people in my life or whatever. It doesn't even matter what story we're telling ourselves, but moving away from whatever it is that we no longer want to create in our lives. And so what his meditations do are force you to visualize the future that you actually want to create. I find that so difficult.
I do too.
So, to visualize something new. And I think most of us do find it difficult because we're all stuck in the past, in the whole way that we experience things is based on these past memories. So it's almost like our brain is programmed and we just fall in line with what's already there. And so visualizing something new requires a lot of focus. So
and
what are your thoughts about that?
Can I just say too that this is I just love this so much because it's just so helpful, when you are able to speak on this kind of level with this depth of consciousness, every time Stacy speaks or Mary speaks, I get something and it lights up for me. And I know that I was just telling Mayor something like this. And it was my husband and I did an hour and a half of couples counseling this morning because we're in couples counseling. And it's hard work and you're vulnerable and all this stuff. Yeah. And we both always have this amazing aha time where we get it and we see each other and it's like, oh my gosh. And, it's relief, but it's also just exhausting to be vulnerable. And,
It
just like,
is.
ugh. And so we finished, and our therapist said to us, now I want both of you to go and do something for yourself before you go out into your day, because this was heavy and we did this. And so I go into my room and I'm thinking this is my same story, the story that I've always told. And it started like this. Why do we do this? Why do human beings come together in such a way that we know will ultimately lead to pushing every button that we have and be emotionally exhausting and doing these things? And that has been my story. And so I will let go of a partner. Like, I was called the runaway bride for a time, that we won't go into that, but I will say that I would drop it. That's we should talk about that someday. And
the runaway bride.
Mm-hmm, and I would drop them and I would say, oh, I'm going to create my new story. Right. And then inevitably I would end up with somebody else. And I realized I stopped that story when I walked into my room this morning, and I said, no, you know why you do this? You do this because you're a human being, and human beings need connection. No matter how much you think you don't want it, no matter how much you think you'd be better up by yourself, what would inevitably happen is you'd be by yourself and it'd be great for a little bit. And then you'd get lonely because you're a human being, Lydia. Stop trying to transcend the human experience. So what do you think about that?
Oh, I love that. Stop trying to transcend the human experience. Oh, totally. And intimacy is hard. It is hard. It is the hardest hill I have ever climbed. And I have been with my love for 3 years, and we have been through it, because it's one of those things where we are the same and we are different. And you talk about pushing buttons, like intimacy, the little tendrils and the little roots, they go back to your original wounds, like the people who installed the buttons.
Yeah.
So it's so worth it, but it's so hard.
Yes.
You're right.
One of the things that I like, one of the exercises that I like is just awareness. And because for myself too, I want to just like crawl in a hole sometimes and put the covers under my head, or whatever metaphor you want to go with. But even just thinking about, when I turn on a light, how many people it took to make that happen. We do these things without kind of thinking, but awareness of our connection to whoever installed the light, or whoever made the light bulb, or whoever drove it to the store, or the checkout person that we bought it from when we got to the store, whoever built the wires. I mean, there's so many aspects to that one, turning on that one light. And if we think about our food and our groceries and our water and our, just the basic aspects of being alive, I think that for me helps remind me that, oh yeah, I do need people. Even if I don't want to be around anybody right now, I do need people.
Oh, that's great. Because I've used that practice for gratitude, but I've never thought of it in terms of, oh, I need people. Yeah, I love that. See, and that's going to help with telling my new story. That's what I told myself this morning. I said, no, you do want it. And I love what Stacy said. She said, it's so worth it. And I wrote it down because that's going to be my new mantra. It's so worth it. I'm going to be on the lookout for that. And that's going to be the new story that I tell. And y'all, I have to tell you this. Okay, here's a book recommendation. It's fiction. Okay, it's fiction, but I'm really inspired to tell everybody about it. It is ready for any spiritual person, like anybody that resonates with the term spiritual journey. It's amazing, and it's called "She Wouldn't Change a Thing." And the author is Sarah, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. I'm going to spell it Adlakha, and it is amazing. And it talks about this. I was reminded of it when Mary was talking about kind of this web of people and how everything intertwines and is dependent on this other thing. And if you change one aspect of this one person's experience, the hundreds of ripples that it creates, and the number of changes. Oh, it's awesome, y'all. And I stayed up until like 2 a.m. because I listened to them on Audible. So I was listening. So everybody, y'all, fiction recommendation, got to do it.
Can I share one more thing that makes this even more just crazy?
Mm-hmm.
So in the intro episode of Full Spirals, the new podcast, I talk about my inspiration for everything, which is the movie It's a Wonderful Life, and the story of George Bailey, and how if he hadn't been born. Have you guys seen that movie?
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yes.
Okay. My daughter Bailey was named after the character of George Bailey.
Oh,
like
my
that's how into it I am. And how so his whole life he only wanted one thing. All he wanted was to get the heck out of Bedford Falls.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until an angel stopped him from killing himself and showed him what the world would have been like if he had never been born, that he realized all he ever had to do was just be George, the George he was meant to be, his authentic self, and the world would be right.
Oh, yeah.
And I
developed that. Oh, I love it. Go ahead.
It's a mind blower, right? Mm-hmm. And I have followed that way since I was 19 years old. I have granted, my consciousness was compromised because I saw it when I was 19 years old at UW Stout in the Umaguma house. Okay. But it was a spiritual experience for me nonetheless. And I named one of my kids after it, and they love it. Like, I don't watch that movie in the same way that other people watch that movie. That movie's the way I live my life. I'm always real conscious of what I might mean to somebody.
Oh, your impact. That's a beautiful way to think of it too.
What a beautiful way to live.
It has been. It hasn't been lucrative. But I do believe in cosmic currency. I just do. And that's tough in a capitalist culture, but I don't care.
Yeah, it is. It is tough. And see, I think that that's an important point to make, that we all really do want to both find our authentic voice and follow it and speak it and do it. And there is this tendency, when you recognize what we do, and that is that you attract, that is, what you resonate or what you radiate, you attract to you. Mm-hmm. And so we think, okay, abundance, everybody, I'm going to, get in this abundance mindset, and I'm going to get rich from being myself, and whether we say it out loud or even consciously acknowledge it, it's there. And then when it doesn't happen, when we don't get paid for that thing, we start to think, well, I shouldn't be doing it. I need to do that, because I got to pay the rent and all of these things. And so there's this push and pull in our culture that would be, find your voice, do what, be you, and then earn a living, make money, be successful. And then the busyness thing, where busyness is like a status symbol in our culture, where it's like, oh, I'm busy.
What I was thinking about when you were talking, Lydia, is that, it is great for us to all have our authentic voices, but then right now we're in a culture where that seems to be colliding so much. And so, we may point the finger at the other and say, well, they're wrong, so that must not be their authentic voice.
Right.
And so I think kind of recognizing this moment that we're in is a lot of tension and pulling, but there is also perhaps a weaving of something new. And that the more of us who bravely practice using our voice, finding our voice, telling our stories, and listening
We need
to
listeners
the other,
too.
listening to that, because Stacy, that was something that you said is, I'm going to tell my story, but then I'm going to listen.
Then I'm going to listen.
And
I love it.
recognizing that as part of it. And I will say that I was really touched for myself about your term, or what you called yourself, as a truth teller. And I have never called myself a truth teller, but that is definitely what I am. And in recent years, I feel like I've gotten in trouble for that, just on a personal level. And so I've kind of hidden my voice because it was safer to do that. I've quieted that voice. And because what I would say is I put my foot in my mouth. I speak the truth, but I don't always do it in a way that people want to hear it or can hear it. And so I think I'm going to personally revisit that with the term truth teller. I really like the way that you described that.
Cool. Yeah, I just had a conversation this weekend with my guy about, especially as women, we are definitely taught to edit. First, be quiet, like just be quiet. And then secondly, make sure you edit and kind of like, make sure that you say it appropriately. Like, can you just tone it down a little bit? Like, you're too this, or you're too that, or you're
too emotional,
too dramatic, too emotional, too loud, too shrill, and there's a lot of fury here.
Yeah,
there just is.
There is,
and it's justified, and it's I'm kind of beyond the notion of making it appropriate.
Yeah.
I understand that I need to operate within a system, but
the word
good for you. I'm glad.
I know, I mean, one of the things that we talk about a lot is love, and showing up in love doesn't always mean polite or nice, or I think showing up for love as love could mean something different than what I was taught as a Southern girl, proper Southern girl, so.
Yeah. And so I heard, it was some podcasts. I love to listen to Radio Lab. I can't wait for Full Spiral's podcast.
I love Radio Lab.
To hear your story.
Thank you.
And they were talking about some study, and it was a woman who was researching, adolescence, and she said something that just, when I heard it, I literally sat down, because I would listen to my podcast while I'm like running around, because I'm busy, which everybody take note, I'm successful because I'm real busy. And so I'm running around doing the dishes, and
look at me.
She said this. She said, we in this culture teach our boys to be fearless and our girls to be careful.
Oof.
Ugh, truth bomb. And it's like, what? And I sat down because I was like, holy cow, that is true. Mary's giving me the wrap up signal, so I know that we're running out of time, but I have so much I want to
wrap it up.
Okay. I have so much I want to say, but I'm going to give the last word to Stacy. Stacy, first of all, so excited to hear more of your story. Every interaction I have with you, I love. And, I'm just so grateful to know you, and can't wait to know you better through listening to the podcast. So when does that happen? When and where can people hear you?
Sure. Well, I plan to, so there's a couple of things. It is going to be coming to Spotify and all of the listening platforms. I have a Full Spirals Facebook page that folks can go to. I also have an artistic community called Kindreds on Facebook that people can join. The Kindreds page is a private group, so it does require that you answer a few questions about your creativity. and what stops you from doing it. So I guess I recommend going to the Full Spirals page and following that. I hope to launch the podcast in earnest in October.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Good. So you are going to announce like when it starts and all of that on that.
Oh, absolutely. On the Full Spirals Facebook page. Definitely.
Awesome. Yep. And I can say, everybody, that I am a kindred spirit officially. I think Mary is also a kindred spirit.
Yes, you both are. You're both kindreds.
We're both kindred spirits. And I get so much out of those postings too. So it's been beautiful to have you on. I really don't want to go because I have 10 more things that I want to point out, but I'm not going to do it, everybody.
Is it okay if I just read a quote?
Yeah. But it's going to.
Can I just finish with a quote? So this is, I have a couple about spirals, but this is one of my favorites. So this is from Christina Baldwin, who is a storyteller. So she says, contact with the sacred occurs in the stillness of the heart and the mind. If there is any real destination to the spiritual quest, it is this point of silence, the middle of the spiral, the center of the self. The only map that does the spiritual traveler any good is the one that leads to the center.
Oh, perfect way to end. Perfect way to end. You have been listening to True and Unpolished, the podcast. Let's see what happens next.